Day 7 of the August 96 10-day retreat in Springwater. As one sits here in a bright, cooling, warming room, with a lot of people who also felt as friends, the birds calling, insects humming, breathing quietly, the sensations that go with that, sitting on a chair or on a mat, a cushion, knees touching or feet touching the floor. If the eyes are open, the brown mat and that golden plain around one, with brown spots and lines wavy. The quietness of it all. The non-interference of anything with anything. What comes to mind as a first question to go into this morning is someone asking, and I may not remember the formulation correctly, you're always giving emphasis on listening. The sounds of wind in the trees, the leaves trembling and quivering. And for me, this person says, listening to cicadas and then birds and then trees moving, tends to do this, what you talked about earlier. This as separate from that, and then this, and then this. Becomes sort of a chronological sequence. Whereas visually, when I look at things, there is the seamlessness you've also talked about. So for me, looking at things seamlessly is easier than the listening. So why do I seem to give emphasis to the sounds without really intending to give emphasis of one object of perception over the other? But it happens so because I do talk more about the wind in the trees. Historically, I believe I'm correct in saying that I used to talk more about seeing. And quite a few people mentioning to me, that's harder for me. Listening is easier. And I think I know why, because in saying look at your anger, look at the fear, well, what is one going to look at? Whereas listening to the sound of the internal sound of anger and fear, which does not exclude the sensations that go with it, I think we do talk amply about. Maybe not so much in this retreat, the contractions of fear, the palpitations of the heart. With anger, blood rushing to the head and narrowing down of the senses. The sensing of this whole chemical mobilization of the body through fearful or anger-arousing thoughts, jealousy-arousing thoughts. It's, in this case, looking at something posed a problem, even though I still say that too. So, can we all learn, including myself, to go lightly with the words, to be flexible, not clutchy, clampy, to allow a word to float around until it's clear what it is referring to, which is much more important than the word which expresses it. The expression can change, improve, vary. But what it refers to, the openness of being in the midst of an ocean of insects. I don't see them, but they're there, they're chirping. Or maybe I'm saying the same word I'm not poetically inclined. This piercing sound. But again, here, be light on the words and be light on trying to grasp the objects of sensation. That's not the point. So that's why it is relatively unimportant whether we talk about seeing or hearing or sensing, tasting. The soup, the heat, the flavor, the texture. The important thing is the openness of perception, which when it is truly open, and the opening does happen on its own, it does not differentiate between this sense and that sense. It is a unity of perceiving. Which is why in Zen there is a phrase, see with your ears and hear with your eyes. Interchangeableness, because there is wholeness of perception. There are about 3 or 4 people, maybe a few more, who come to this retreat, to these retreats, who are hard of hearing or almost deaf. And to my surprise, no one has ever complained or worried about this, which when a person tells me they have a hard time hearing, I wonder, what does a person do with this constant reference to listening? Maybe people who are hard of hearing or deaf have already a lifelong experience of living in a perceptive world which others don't understand. So they put up with one more such thing. Somebody referring to listening when I can't hear the insects. Or maybe there are other senses that are open and are functioning freely to even make up for a missing one, which does happen. So coming back to this experiencing of things happening chronologically, one after another, that of course, maybe one has noticed this by now, has to do with the sequentialness of thinking. If all thoughts happened at the same time, it would be an undifferentiable cacophony. So thought is one after another, one at a time. But just because thought is not capable of functioning simultaneously as this world does, doesn't mean that the world is as thought says it is, or expresses in its limitations. And this is what the person said this morning too, what a valuable thing too to learn from and to look at. Why is it one thing after another, separated? Of course, the understanding can dawn that the world of thinking, even though having its place and function in our lives, is not the world as it is happening, this moment, unfolding or defolding. And yet, due to habit and expediency and programming and history, we mostly live in the world of thinking, where our problems arise. So is it possible to see or sense or listen to the sound of thinking without being deceived by it, seduced by it, maybe for moments at a time? The tradition is so powerful, the habit so strong. One cannot expect this to go away at one fell swoop, even though there has been insight into it. Because the whole process of thinking and imaging and fancying is totally connected with the functioning of this highly sensitive and expressive organism, expressive of thoughts by manifesting feelings, energies, emotions, sensations, in conjunction with the thinking and remembering. It is an amazing network and has its addictive ways, addiction to pleasant patterns of sensing and feeling. Wanting more of that, wanting to hold on to it, fearing the ending of pleasurable sensations. See the connection between wanting and having and fearing? What I want, I will also fear to lose. So the going together of pleasure and pain. Often solely induced by mentation, mental pictures and nostalgic remembrances and anticipations. Transposing itself in this organism to states of feeling which we want more of or hate to come into, or afraid or resistant to feel. So it's when one detects more and more, doesn't one, the futility and wastefulness of hassling with states of thinking or states of emoting or feeling because it's all so intricately interconnected in such a vast realm of human consciousness that one really wouldn't know where to begin anymore with a complaint or with the remedy. And therefore this amazing possibility of just beholding it all, seeing it all, listening to it all, in wonderment rather than judgment. When that happens, then our states of feeling, paining or pleasuring pass lightly. When it is all beheld and listened to spaciously, not excluding that wondrous music of leaves quivering in the wind and birds twittering in between. So we haven't communicated with each other verbally in 2 days. I emphasize the verbally because communication is there among us, isn't it, even if we don't talk. It's one of the most joyful discoveries of a retreat. We don't need to talk with each other necessarily to be in touch with each other, to feel each other's presence in a new way. That may be more deeply sensitive. Remember the first retreat I ever went to, in a small house with a narrow kitchen. I don't remember whether someone was standing at the sink washing beans in a colander or whether I was standing at the sink washing the beans. But it so happened that either I needed to go under the sink to put the garbage away or somebody else did. That's blurred. But the wondrous thing was the sensing what somebody else needed to do and getting out of the way, so that the door was accessible to open and put the stuff in there, and then the person moving back to the sink, like a dance, an unchoreographed dance. Also, later at home, I don't know whether it was after that retreat or later on, in drying and putting away the dishes close by or reaching far up into the closet, cabinet, watching the hands or the hands appearing, again was felt like a dance. With no one doing it, just being that beholding, which had no particular self-center to it. I say particular, not a thought about me doing this. And yet, it all happened here. It's happening here now. The memory of it is happening here together with cicadas. Brings me to question which was briefly asked this morning by someone. Remembering a moment at which thoughts were followed to their source, and with that can be a real concentrated practice to follow a thought to its source. With that, a feeling of the narrowing of the self down to a point, and then an instant fear, wait a minute. Maybe the thought, I may disappear. Which of course arouses fear in human beings, in living beings. No living being wants to disappear. Maybe hide, but not disappear completely. We struggle, every living being struggles to stay alive. And the response that came in pondering this incident that was told, the response that came was, it's worth the risk not to hold back due to thoughts, I may disappear. Where will I be? All of this kind of stuff to find out. Because nothing to be afraid of. When our true state manifests, in which there is no self-center as we know it. That network, which we dealt with a little while ago, of wanting and fearing and emoting and needing to know that I'm continuing, and how will I continue, the constant worry about it, and hopeful and wishful thinking based on the past. That network does not need to be in operation all the time. It's not needed for our survival from moment to moment. It certainly is not needed when we go to sleep. I know very few people who don't love to go to sleep and worry about not getting enough sleep, worry whether they will find sleep, particularly deep sleep. And the deeper the sleep, the more in abeyance is that network of me-ness with its time and space categories. That's why we love to sleep, but we do want to be sure we wake up again. Although we would never know that we didn't if we didn't. So what inconsistency there is in thinking of craving to sleep and fearing to die, or die to the sense of me being present. But it's not blameworthy. Please don't interpret it or project blaming onto me. I'm not doing that. It needs to be directly experienced. Being here without being here. The words came yesterday in response to someone's note. Homeless at home. And the way this operates, by watching it, the mind craves explanations and understanding, which of course includes intellectual understanding. Very helpful to have clear intellectual understanding of the processes that rule us, compel us, scare us, deceive us, or please us. The intellectual formulation of it is, when energy gathers here in this instant of open listening, looking, sensing and being here, awareness, attention, presence, pure being, then the energy does not travel into this network and makes it light up and blink or overheat. So it's not gotten rid of, it isn't dropped, eliminated, conquered. It's just not, the plug is pulled from it temporarily. And in time, one is serious about this work and entering into quietness, even with all of its discomforts and negativities and unpleasantnesses of discovering what goes on. In time, this shift happens easier and lighter. And those parts of the network which are less used deteriorate or become weaker. Don't light up so quickly or so long, or maybe not at all if the energy is weak. Memories do weaken. Maybe not old memories, but new memories weaken. It's not just an aging process. People who tell me that they're dismayed at their memory going and they must be getting old, I think it's a wonderful thing. You don't remember what somebody said or did 2 weeks ago. So you can meet him, her, them freshly, innocently. And that we have an effect on each other this way, because if you don't meet somebody memory-laden, grudge-loaded, personally sense that and have an easier time responding in lightness. Of course, it can be very impractical not to remember things, so one has to find ways of not forgetting things that are important, writing them down and then not forgetting where one put the slip. And the less we go over a new memory, the less it can become an old memory. It dies a natural death. It's not being nourished and fed to keep alive. So, with that, I come to a question which was asked of me in the very first meeting, and again today, and it may come up more frequently for people, particularly when the day before retreat or before retreat ends or the ending day, people wonder what of this can I actualize or apply or take with me in my daily life. The quiet, the silence, the spaciousness, the maybe somewhat decreasing reactivity, although it can flare up very quickly when that juice flows in the network. First of all, not to imagine or wishfully want something that needs a tremendous amount of careful coordination and creation to necessarily take place in one's hectic, pressurized daily life. These are two different situations, each fulfilling different functions. So not to fret when the silence of a quiet retreat blows up, may it blow up during the Last Supper, when this tremendous urge comes out to talk and communicate and laugh, a lot of release of energy. Although often as the social contexts ebb away, one may find as a residue of quietness, often lasting quite a time into one's daily life again, and then slowly or quickly ebbing away of this quality here. And yet what we have been talking about today refers to our daily living. Maybe not by hours of silent sitting and people preparing food for one, shopping and whatever is done for us here. But the watching, beholding what goes on in the drama of our daily life, the drama which may be tragedy, heroic tragedy, comedy, whatever. One play following the other. In the theater, we sit at a distance and watch it, and then the curtain goes, we may still sob some. But it's clear the show is over. Can this wisdom enter our daily lives? Or do we find trying to hold on to the incident or not even enter into it when it is there to be entered? I don't mean entering into stuff that need not be entered into. One can also learn that better in the course of time, to leave things alone that one knows will only upset or overfeed one. To become more moment to moment wise with the input, which comes under this whole thing of living intelligently, organismically intelligently, understanding the needs and limits of the organism and giving some heed to it. Sometimes it's not possible. And then when it's not possible, not to fret over it, because that's more input into an already overloaded system. To let it be and not waste energy on opposing or resisting when one cannot avoid it. But our problem is as much with situations which we're addicted to or attracted to. And whether it's possible for that wisdom to kick in remains to be seen from moment to moment. One may experience the overriding impulse not to be wise, but to have and enjoy. Go with the current of habit and wanting. And if that's happening, can one behold the consequences when they do happen? Not with a wagging moralistic finger, but intelligently seeing more and more the connections between this leads to that, or this has led to that. And if that memory comes up again as one is about to enter into the thing again, maybe won't be so difficult to abstain, to remain with being here, rather than sliding into, which is usually highly accompanied with fantasy, our overindulgences. They are accompanied heavily by thought and fantasy, or evoked or maintained. Check it all out. It's a beautiful thing to have a new approach to seeing ourselves in this mad game called life. Although it need not be so mad as one can experience here at times. It can also have a basic sanity to it, which has its own miracles. If some of this sounded too abstract, then please bring it to a meeting and say, what did you mean by this? It sort of reverberated, sounded a bell, but I like to go into it more. And then we can do that. For somehow a shift in mode is needed to come up with good examples all the time. It's a chore, unless the example presents itself spontaneously. And yet when we start fresh, then we take a time. One also understands the concrete problem somebody has. One enters into that. Then concreteness will manifest quite easily. Or if not, let's remind each other of our abstractness so we can learn something. And learn to shift more easily. We will end here for today.